Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. As you can see from the title of this video, I'll be sharing my driving experience with the Solo from Electra Meccanica. Even though I have owned the Solo for almost 2 months from the making of this video, I'm just going to go over my experience driving or putting the first 2,000 miles on my Solo within about 2 weeks. So that's 2 weeks worth of work days for myself. So just as a warning before I start to maybe possibly bore some of you guys, just know that the goal for this video is to be as informative as I possibly can, given that I am an actual owner of the Solo. I have not seen many videos online from actual customers. Probably I ran into like one or two on YouTube, but most of the videos that I've seen are just of people test driving. So I'm going to go over a lot of details that I think might help anyone who's considering purchasing the Solo. So since this is my first ever EV, and since I don't know what to expect from an electric vehicle, I decided to create a log with information like mileage, how long my trip lasted, the speeds that I'm traveling, among other things. So I know it's going to probably be a lot, but just bear with me, please. And I promise there's a purpose for all of this. So first thing I wanted to share was that the Solo was not one of my first options. I was looking at two other EVs, one being the Chevy Bolt and the other being the Nissan Leaf. So I commute roughly 145 miles a day, so that's 73 miles each way. I was really debating on whether or not even considering going for the Solo because of the total range. So it based on the Electra Meccanica's website, they claim that the Solo can reach up to a total of 100 miles on a full charge. The Nissan Leaf, the 40 kilowatt battery, the range is about 150 miles on a full charge, and the Chevy Bolt has a range of about 260 miles on a full charge. I know that the range can vary from car to car based off of driving conditions, so the way a person drives, as well as other features that are used in the car like the AC or the radio. So I understand if a person drives at high speeds, it's going to affect how fast the battery drains. So I have kept that in the back of my mind when choosing between those three options. With that, given information regarding the Solo, I figured that for every mile that I travel, I should be using up about 1% on the battery. So that made sense in my brain. If you have 100 miles on a full battery charge, and given the trip that I drive, when I commute to work about 73 miles, I should have at least 25% left on the battery at the end of my trip. So my plan was and is to use the Solo strictly for work, nothing else. So just work, and maybe if I need to go get some groceries before I head home, that was a possibility for me for that, when considering the electric vehicles. So in order for me to confirm this theory of mine, I booked an appointment to test drive at the Huntington Beach location for the Solo. And that day I drove both on the freeway and on the streets for about 15 minutes. And when I got back to the dealership, I compared the battery that was consumed versus how much I drove. And sure enough, it gave me that 1-to-1 ratio that I was expecting on the Solo. So after I test drove the Solo, I went home still kind of debating, kind of getting a feel of what I could expect from the Solo. And when I looked more into the Bolt, I realized that it no longer qualified for one of the tax credits according to the IRS. So unfortunately, I eliminated that from my options. And then I ran into some trouble while looking into the Nissan Leaf. So I specifically wanted the 40 kilowatt battery model, and it was like in a charcoal gray color. I forgot what the actual color was, the name of the color, but most dealerships that did not have the Leaf available mentioned that it was probably going to take about a month or so to get to the dealership. And then there were some dealerships that actually did have the model and the color that I wanted, but they did warn me ahead of time that it had a price markup of about $10,000. So I figured, it probably wasn't going to work out because I needed something that was going to be available as soon as possible, given the increase in gas prices. So I really wanted to get something that was going to help me save on gas. Eventually, I went with the Solo because it was the most affordable option for me, and also because it was available. Plus, I really did like the car because it's really different and it's not like anything I've ever seen before. So the first thing that I noticed when I looked into the Solo was that the Electra Meccanica company has geared the Solo more towards the average commuter than any other type of consumer or driver out there. So to be quite honest, I felt like this was an excellent strategy, especially placing most of the dealerships in Southern California, specifically around the Los Angeles area. And there's a lot of people that I know that commute, whether it was like in college or in my previous jobs. There's a lot of people that commute. Even in my current job, there's people that commute. But I mean, obviously, you don't have to be a commuter in order to purchase the Solo. But since I commute so much, I felt like this was a great option for me. Also on their website, Electra Meccanica states that the average American commutes on average a total of 39 miles a day. I'm not sure where they got this statistic from, but when I click on the number 2 and number 3 superscript notes, there's no type of source or no type of data as far as where they got this information from. So I would really like to know where exactly they got this statistic from. Living in LA, just speaking from experience, at first I found it unusual that many people would commute 1 or maybe even 2 hours to work or go to school in LA, but as the years passed, I came to see it as like a common thing. So I've known people who commuted to LA from places like Lancaster, Huntington Beach, or even Moreno Valley, but to this day, even in my current job, there's people that even commute as much as I do, maybe a little bit less, like 10 miles less, but everyone practically commutes in the LA area. We're all driving from a different town to get here to LA. But in my opinion, I don't think that this statistic applies to most of us who commute. I think a lot of us are commuting way more than the 39 miles, but Electra Meccanica knows what they're doing, and I think that it's good for them to have placed their dealerships in the Los Angeles area. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys an Excel spreadsheet that I created with the information that I logged onto my notebook. The column to the very left are the days that I work, so blue being night shifts and green being day shifts. The W represents my trip going to work, and H represents my trip going home. I noticed that I'll end up with the most charge when I'm driving to work, regardless of what shift I'm working, and also when I drive home after a day shift. And I believe this is mainly due to the fact that since I'm stuck in traffic during these times, I'm kind of braking and accelerating, and with this I'm using the regenerative braking, and it's helped me tremendously. So if you don't know what the regenerative braking is, I'm going to read what it says on the manual. And I didn't realize this until maybe like the third day of driving, so I felt kind of slow with this. So this is what it says on the manual. It says, whenever your vehicle is moving and your foot is off the accelerator, regenerative braking slows the vehicle and feeds energy back to the vehicle's battery. At very high state of charge, regenerative braking will be limited or turned off. By anticipating your stops and removing your foot from the accelerator to slow down, you can take advantage of the energy gained from regenerative braking to increase your vehicle's range. Now, I will say that I have tried to use this feature like as soon as I leave home and as soon as I leave from work, and it doesn't kick in, or it doesn't start working until I'm down to about 97%. So when I find myself in traffic, I'm always gliding through the traffic without really having to press on the accelerator pedal. And I'm also kind of gliding like over the hills on the freeways. And this is because where I live in the Inland Empire, the city where I live is at an elevation of 1,053 feet above sea level, compared to where I work in the Los Angeles area. It's at 39 feet above sea level of elevation. So you do the math, that's like more than 1,000 feet of a difference. Like, it's so even though it doesn't feel like it, when I'm driving to work, I'm going slightly downhill. Now when I travel back home after a day shift, even though I'm traveling slightly back uphill, because I'm stuck in the traffic for about 2 hours at a time, and all that braking that I do in between the traffic helps me to really put enough energy back into the battery where I'm able to end up with about like 20% of battery left on the battery. So just as a warning, because I don't recommend anyone driving while using their phone at the same time, I did want to record this feature so that you guys can see how it plays out. So when I'm driving home during the mornings, I know for a fact that I'm consuming the most energy overall, because I'm driving not only back towards the higher elevation by the mountains, since I'm driving slightly uphill, but also there's really no traffic, so I'm constantly moving and I'm not faced with any type of slowdowns, and ultimately I don't have the opportunity to use the regenerative braking. So going back to the spreadsheet, you'll see that on the 5th column I have items highlighted orange, red, and green, and these are only when it pertains to my trips going to work. So based on the information that I collected, I determined that in order for me to be completely charged by the time I clock off from my shift, which are 12-hour shifts, I need to have arrived at my job with at least 23% of battery life left over. So everything that's in green is kind of like the green light, like I'm good to go. Everything in orange means that I'm not going to be charged by the time I go home, but I'll still manage to be able to make it home with that amount of charge that I have at the end of shift. And red means that I would need to stay about an hour or so more after work, and would run the risk of probably not making it home with that amount left over when I'm done with my shift. I'm going to show you guys the charging times based on the outlets that you connect to, and this is on the manual. So if my battery were to be just about depleted, it will take about 15 hours to be completely charged on the standard 120 volt outlet, which is called a trickle charge. and it's your typical outlet that you find at home. And on a 220 volt outlet, which is what I have at home, it will take me roughly about 4 hours to completely charge. So this is the reason why I'm mostly concerned about how much battery charge is left on the Solo when I get to work. I don't need to worry yet, at least not now, what I end up with when I get home. I did want to share with you guys the display on the Solo, what it looks like when I plug into either outlet. And here, the following is what I get after I connect to the trickle charge outlet at work. As you can see, I'm looking at about 11 hours to be completely charged. And then comparing it to what my estimated time to be completely charged looks like when I get home, it's roughly about 4 to 5 hours. I have noticed that the displayed estimated time to charge is the most accurate when I plug into the 120 volt outlet. Most of the time it's off by no more than like 10 or 15 minutes. But when I'm connected onto the 220 volt outlet, the difference can range from a couple of hours to even like something like 7 hours. So why this happens, I'm not too sure, but I'm gonna be honest, it's a little bit frustrating. On several occasions, I have witnessed very different and inaccurate amounts of overall charge times. At work, this happened twice. Again, I'm not sure why this is happening, but I would like to see if Electra Meccanica has an explanation for this. Here, I have an instance where I got to work with 20% left on the battery, but the required charging time was 10 hours. Usually, if I end up with 23 or 25% when I get to work, I'll need about 11 hours to charge. So I don't understand why on that day it was less time, but again, I don't have an explanation for that. And then another time I had 23% left on my battery when I got to work, but the time displayed on the screen said 3 hours to charge. And then at home when I arrived, usually if I arrive with like 14% or something like that, it'll have like 6 hours or like 4 to 6 hours in order for me to be completely charged. But on this day, it stated that the car would be completely charged in 2.5 hours. And on another occasion, when I got home with 10% of battery left, it told me that I'd have to wait 7 hours. Say if I were to go to like a charging station at the mall, there are some charging stations that charge a fee if you're done charging and you don't unplug right away. Also, the app itself, I noticed, is very inaccurate. At most, it's gone about 7 days without being able to refresh or show the accurate charge on the car. So I'm still kind of testing and recording and counting how many times I'm able to catch this happen to me, but with like the inaccurate times both on the app and on the Solo displays, I don't know like if this is common with electric vehicles, but if it is, and if you guys have experienced something like that, I would be very curious and would like to know if you guys can share that in the comment section. Now, going back to the spreadsheet, I know that day one shows I arrived to work with 17% left on the battery. So that day I actually went to the store to get some groceries, and when it was time for me to plug the Solo onto the 120 volt outlet, the display showed me a time that, what was it? I think it was going to be like more than 12 hours or something. And I was going to have to wait about 2 hours after work in order to be completely charged. So I had to go to a charging station just for a little bit so that I can speed it up, that little process. Okay, so like I mentioned before, right now I'm not really too worried or focusing too much, I would say, on the energy consumption or how fast the battery's consumed going home. But I do plan to talk about that hopefully next time I make a video. But right now, like, I'm not using the radio, I'm not using the heater as much, but there's times when I use the AC to defog the windshield. So so far I haven't seen any much of a difference between that, whether I use it or not. So I'm curious to be able to see if in the future when I do use the heater or the radio, to see if that and how much it affects the draining of the battery. Now, if I were to give my honest review of the Solo, I think I would be giving it a 7 out of 10. And this is because, well, you see, even though I have learned about and used the regenerative braking, I'm really bummed that I have to drive much slower than usual so as to not quickly consume the battery. And I've realized that I can drive no faster than 65 miles an hour, maybe 70. But anyone that lives in LA knows that nobody drives that speed. Majority of people in California, or at least here in LA, we drive like 70 miles, 75. I would say, you know what? I would say we would drive 75 miles an hour or more. So very rarely do I see anyone driving 65 miles an hour, and I feel like I'm driving like a turtle. I honestly do. Like, I wish I could go faster. I've tried, trying to stick to like 70 or 75, and I'm watching the percentage of the battery just go down very quickly. So that's why, I'm really bummed, and I really wish that it would be a whole lot better when it comes to the ability of what speed you're driving at. So and because of that, because the fact that I have to drive much slower, it means my commute is taking much longer. So I'm probably adding about 20 minutes, which, compared to my other cars, which are gas-powered vehicles, I could get to work in about an hour. So I do really miss that. So as far as my recommendation, not saying that anyone's asking for my recommendation, but, I would like to recommend, because, my situation is unique and I'm lucky enough to have the ability to charge at work. I wouldn't recommend the Solo to anyone who's driving anything more than I do. I mean, even if you did have the ability to charge at work with a 220 volt outlet, I would definitely not take that risk, because, there's been instances where I've feared that I would not be able to get home on a full charge. This is just one way. So I feared that I wouldn't be able to get home on a full charge, even though I drove, like I said, like a turtle, like 60 miles or 65 miles an hour going home. I don't know how long this is going to last, because I'm aware that batteries kind of lose their potential. They lose their ability to work as they did in the beginning. So I'm very curious to see how long this is going to last. But I would be really bummed out if it happens like within like the next 2 years, 3 years. I think that it should be able to, last me. This vehicle should last me quite some time. So, if someone does not have the ability to charge at work, in my opinion, I would recommend this car to anyone driving a total of maybe 60 miles round trip. So I think that would be considered safe. Now, it would give you that wiggle room too, like if you need to run an errand or two after work or something like that. Now, with all this information that I shared, I really hope that this helps you guys when and if you guys are considering purchasing the Solo. If you guys want me to address something more in detail for next time, just let me know, and I'll do the best that I can, see if I can answer anything more in detail. I do plan, not sure when I will though, I do plan to be able to make more content relating to the Solo. I want to discuss things like, getting insurance, because I had like a unique experience. So yeah, I'm gonna share a little bit of that later on. And then I also want to make a video of like my car and how I have things in the car. I do want to buy some accessories, which are not officially from Electra Meccanica, but I guess you could call it some life hacks or something, whatever I guess you want to call it. And then I also want to make another video with my experience taking the Solo for maintenance and all of that good stuff. So yeah, so I hope you guys can tune in next time. And yeah, that's all I have for today. Thanks again.